Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mitten Backstage. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm happy to be sitting down with Makenzie Mattis. She's a Grand Rapids-based drummer and educator who performs as a freelancer around with different groups. You may have seen her on stage with Okaycool. You might see her with drum lines. You might see her serving you up a cup of coffee because she's also been a barista. But we go back to our days at Grand Valley. We both studied there for our undergrads, and it was nice catching up since we hadn't really had a conversation since before the pandemic started. And even in recent weeks, we only caught up briefly on one of my residency gigs, so it was nice to sit down and have a more formal chat. If you liked today's conversation and you'd like to contribute to these podcasting efforts of mine, you can head on over to patreon.com/Tracy Snedeker. There you can get access to exclusive merch, the monthly mailed newsletter with the Sticker of the Month Club edition, as well as all of the podcast episodes early in audio and video format. Plus, I'm going to be creating some other content that will go up first for patrons. This could be all sorts of things related to music, life, and more. You can also head over to DutcherSnedeker.com to see what else I'm up to all around the internet. All right, thanks again for tuning in. Feel free to share this on whatever platform you're using. Give the profile a little follow, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, all those wonderful places. Feel free to show your love by sharing it with those who might enjoy these types of conversations I'm having with Michigan musicians. All right, let's get right into the conversation with Makenzie Mattis. It'll be season 2. It'll just be all strangers.
Yeah, it'll be like, okay, all my friends, who do you know that I don't know that wants to be on the podcast?
Someone let me know about a cool person. But yeah, it's been a nice like extra thing to have, and it feels I mean, the unnatural parts of podcasting for me are just the branding and presentation of it. Everything else has been like fine so far.
Yeah, it's mostly chatting and whatever, as long as you know kind of what you want to talk about, then it just all falls into place.
Yeah, and it's like there is something to be said of longevity. Like most podcasts figure out their voice. I was listening to multiple people say this, but I think I heard it from Kev on stage most recently, because his branding is like online comedy, skits and videos and content, and then some podcasting and some live events. And he was like, yeah, we didn't really know what we were doing, and we didn't really have an audience until like 100 episodes in at least.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Such a hodgepodge of things.
Yeah, it's like it's funny seeing how many people like some of my guests that I'll have this summer are other podcasters that started podcasting last year. As like, oh, I should probably have some other identity or brand that's not just tied to traveling if I can't travel.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I haven't even tried, reaching out for sponsors yet, or like, I'm only like 20 some episodes in. So I feel like once I get to the end of the year, I'll have, like a year's worth of every podcast I've been doing. Yeah. And hopefully doing 3 podcasts, I'll feel better about approaching for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I know you've got the one under your name, and then this is Mitten Backstage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then do you have another one too?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I kind of think of it as like Mitten Backstage DLC, where it's like the podcast is Life is a Piano, and it's the same types of conversations I'd have, but a little bit more focused on keyboard players because I don't get to meet a lot of them.
Yeah.
Or I'm friendly with them, but we haven't done a lot of gigging together or playing together.
I mean, how good too is if you're the keyboard player, they're not the keyboard player.
Yeah, and the only time I've been on two 2 keyboard gigs are like if the budget calls for it, or if it just happens to be someone else is in town and they know the music and they play like an organ sound or something and they're comfortable being that role
Yeah.
versus the time in high school where I was playing like the Where You At Urban Youth Conference, and this keyboard player who I'm sure, I imagine he's still in the area, Kenneth. He was like, oh yeah, you take the top stuff and I'll take the bottom stuff, or whatever we worked out. And then his playing, of course, is like big octaves, powerful, big full chords, controlling all the harmonic movement, just very expressive. And I'm just like, just something. Yeah. Is this what you wanted? But yeah, I'm sure that's, I think back to Grand Valley, like all the percussion ensemble stuff. I'm sure it was interesting trying to keep track of like, it's a bunch of steel pans.
Oh God, yeah. And then like sometimes I would think about that when you would get a gig and you had a piano and a guitar player, and then it was like, okay, who's doing what? You figure that out. That's your job, not mine. But that's a lot of chord going on.
A lot of notes. It sounds like you're, yeah. Well, and that's something I always run into too when I have another chordal instrument. It's like on all the Blue Water Kings gigs, I have to pay attention to how people are playing certain things, especially like dominant chords, especially like people who, they want to flex their jazz knowledge and they're like, ooh, look at this cool altered dominant. And it's like, cool. The song has a different one, but I'll play yours because you keep playing it.
So I have to play it. I have to match now.
Yeah, it's like if I play a sharp 9 and you play a flat 9, it's going to be super crunchy.
Yeah.
And it might work, but it also might not because of the differences in how the instruments do voicings. But yeah, it's a thing. But yeah, how's I don't know, we're out of quarantine, out of the pandemic. There's just a million asterisks on everything. But how's well, I guess how's summer? That's a better thing than just
current summer.
Yeah. In comparison to last year, probably too. It's probably way different.
It's very different. Like I just ran and got some dinner, and like you can pick up food now without having to wear a mask, and like go grocery shopping without having to wear a mask, and like just little stuff like that is kind of freaky still. It just like makes me think before I walk in places. Like I feel like I'm missing something because I don't have it on.
Right.
So it freaks me out a little bit. But like last summer, it's like it was over a year. Okaycool hadn't rehearsed in like over a year.
Wow.
Yeah, because our last rehearsal was like end of March, beginning of April, and we had all summer, winter, spring off, and we're just now starting back again. Like I just saw them for the first time in May.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's way longer, because I think of like Earth Radio, we had breaks, but we were still like, we were recording an album and we had stuff we had to meet to put out, and we were doing some very limited outdoor or like pre-taped things, but even then not a ton of them until later in the summer. And even then Busy was like, oh, we have 2 gigs.
Yeah.
But yeah, to like meet with your band, and then I'm sure part of it was because it's like, well, gatherings not the best idea, and then income, still need to make money, still need to figure out, yeah, just a nightmare. Hello, hope you're starting to enjoy the conversation happening. I wanted to let you know that this is one of a few edits that I had to make for this episode. I think it was just a weird time of the day for ISPs or whatever. The Zoom call was abnormally choppy. Luckily, not so frequently that I had to scrap everything, but just enough where there'll be some weird cuts. I meant to mention this earlier, but now's a good time as any because we're still pretty close to the beginning. But yeah, uh, I basically we adjusted some settings and then we jump back into the same talking point that we left off on. So enjoy. Um, but yeah, so back to Okaycool. I'm sure it was great. Like, what was it like? You guys were just getting together because you knew you could and you wanted to jam, or was it like, hey, let's? It's like, hang out, but also business. Like, here's gigs, or I don't know.
Like in the beginning when we were starting out. Do you mean?
Uh, I guess the return, but I'm also curious like how the band got together. Because I've only seen you guys play. Like I know Alana.
Yeah.
I always say I mess up all the Elenas and Alanas.
Yeah, Alana.
Uh, because I first met her at Grand Valley. I accompanied her on a voice piece when she was studying there, and then cut to years later. It's like, oh, we're sharing a bill at the Tip Top.
Yeah, she's so cool. She's amazing. I met her through the project actually. But well, so the coming back together is like just us hanging out and kind of getting our footing back. We don't really have any gigs. Right now we're not totally searching to line up gigs at the moment. I think we're just kind of getting a feel for playing with each other again and just kind of getting back into music because a year is such a long break to take, not just like for the project itself, but for musicians as a whole. Like if you're not active during that time, it's like a reset almost. You gotta get your chops back, get back into that mindset, and like I as a musician trying to do music stuff, I'm kind of in it, like teaching and playing a little bit more, but Maddie and Dustin have their own separate careers. Music isn't like their main thing, and it's not Alana's either. And so I think for them, it's kind of like a return to music after like a long sabbatical. So just kind of getting a feel for the band again and getting back into it. When the project started, it actually was Alana's solo project. Um, and it wasn't called Okaycool at first. I think it was just the songs were her solo songs. She wrote them all herself. And then um, Maddie kind of got involved and it was a duo. So Maddie plays bass guitar. It was a duo of Maddie and Alana for a long time. And then so that was still kind of like acoustic since it was just a guitar and a bass. And they were like, we could make this more of like an electric thing. Like if we got some drums, it would kind of bring it into like a full band like sphere. And so Maddie's husband Dustin ended up playing drums. He plays, it's not his main instrument, but he's a guitarist mainly. And so Dustin joined the project on drums, and that was when they kind of took her solo acoustic songs and turned them into full band tracks. Started playing some gigs. They did a Dogtown Studio is what I believe it's called, like session. And that was the first music that they put out together, just the three of them. And then just through happenstance, I was working at the zoo at the time, John Ball Zoo, and I met Maddie through a friend, and we just happened to be talking one day, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to come like play with us? Just like sit in and play. I've got like this group, and we're kind of looking for a drummer, but like nothing serious. If you just like want to come and play with us and like hang out." And I was like, "Sure, I'm in between projects right now. I would love to just come play and hang out." And I went, and they were super cool, and we just kind of connected. and then the rest is history. Then I ended up joining the band after that.
Nice. Yeah, it's always interesting when a band is like, it's not it's not the start of the goal. Like when it's, oh, it was a solo act, and then, oh, I want to bring my friend in on this. Oh,
Yep.
maybe we'll try a band. Maybe like just the slow evolution of
Yeah.
a thing. But yeah, it's definitely the time to, like, I don't know, at least touch base with bandmates and music collaborators. And I feel like that's all I've been doing the last couple months, is like seeing who's around and kind of reminding myself of like, oh yeah, I wanted to work with these people. Now we can get into into physical spaces together again,
Yeah.
and workshop stuff in person instead of just sending cloud files back and forth.
And it's one of those weird things too, where like it's almost as if like everyone has been through this like kind of really serious and traumatic thing, but like everybody went through it in different ways. And so I feel like we've all had our little like realizations, or like things have like changed for us, maybe like a shifting in perspective of like what do I want to do, like with my life, with my time. Like I feel like it was just such a time where like priorities were shifted, and so I feel like that either pushed people into doing music more or more seriously, or in the opposite direction of like, I'm burned out, I'm taking a step back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the amount of people that I saw that like they went from trying to be a more active freelancer, trying to, make a certain project work. The amount of people I saw that were like, you know what, I only have these goals now. I'm going to, a lot of State Farm agents, a lot of, like real estate people, a lot of
Yeah.
musicians became real estate agents. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's interesting seeing that shift of like it's almost like a weird test of like, hey, would you still do this if you knew you weren't going to go anywhere or make money or do anything significant for a year?
Yeah.
It's crazy because, for me, I found myself like the music never really left fully. Like there were days I didn't do anything or didn't, as with any prolonged nothing. You
Yeah.
find time to do nothing, but you also find time, like starting the Patreon and starting the podcasts. But that wasn't until December. Like the rest of the year was just like, still goofing around on social media here and there, doing certain remote collabs, getting the office at Third Coast, doing more freelance writing, like for album reviews and other stuff. But it was like the past year definitely made me reflect on myself and just being like, oh, I want to keep doing all these things, but I need to, make some changes in certain areas so that it's an easier it's easier to have the energy to do a lot of the stuff that I want versus just being like kind of a passenger to my schedule instead of a driver.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that.
Yeah, I don't know if you like, did you come into 2021 like, oh, I'm only gonna take this many students, I'm gonna focus on these things, or is it kind of like sifting through the schedule and being like, oh yeah, I did want to not be as busy?
I like when 2021 came in, and like things started rolling out and like opening back up, it was like, okay, here we go, like things are going to start picking back up. And then as things got added to my schedule, I realized like, okay, like if everything goes according to plan and nothing shuts back down, like I'm going to be right back where I was before this all started schedule wise. And I came to a realization that like maybe that's not something I want. Like I'm not that old, but I've been teaching like high school drumline stuff every like summer band camp, fall, like winter, all the way through the year for the last like 6 years. 6 or 7. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's 3 nights a week, every night of your week, every single year, that like at some point I just have to decide if that's something that I want to like keep doing or not. Um and I do want to keep doing it, but I've had this big shift, especially having all the free time off, where I'm shifting a little bit more from playing into like the recording, like producing world, which I was always interested in before. I just never had the time because my schedule was so busy. Like I was kind of letting myself be a passenger instead of actually being in charge. I was just like, yeah, I've got gigs, I'm teaching students, I'm teaching marching band, and then of course I also had my day job, so that I could pay the bills or whatever. And um and I just kind of put it on the back burner for so long. And now that I've had like the free time, I started last year, I started taking classes for recording tech. Um, and I've been getting really into that, like diving super deep. And I just kind of put all of my energy into that when there really wasn't anything else to do. And now that that has started to fill up my schedule, it's kind of been like, okay, now that I'm doing this, how much of the other stuff do I want to add back in? Now that I am finally doing what I always wanted to do, but I told myself I never had the time to do, and now I'm doing it. So I'm like, I'm at this weird point where I'm kind of just deciding what I want to add back in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that feeling because coming from, all my uncles are musicians. A lot of my cousins are in or just finished music school. Some of them, one of them just finished his master's. So there's a million different like in knowing, my family are all musicians. Obviously, I can look at different accomplishments and different career focuses and being like, oh, okay, so like this person's got the academic route and they play here and there, but a lot of their stuff is through academia. This person's got a symphony job, that's their bread and butter, and then they like doing clinics and other local regional concert performances. And then another, I think he even described, my uncle Greg, he described it as his life as a mixing board where he could like like channel 1 is private instruction, and then channel 2 is the preparatory academy education job, and then fader 3 is being owning and running a studio out of his house for recording, and number 4 is composition, writing for his different groups and for dance companies that he's contracted with. And at any point he could just say like, you know what, I want to travel more and do more stuff with the dance group. I'm going to put the rest of the stuff on the, fade that out a little bit, not do as much and focus more on that. Oh, well, now it's winter, I can't travel with them as much. I'll put composition on the back burner and put, gigs and studio recording or whatever. So I'm kind of in a similar boat where I've always been interested in a lot of different aspects, but now I'm really, I want to create something that's like that I see so many people do online, even if it's it's not 10 million subs or 1,000 subs, but
Yeah.
people who can just like wherever they go, like a Mark Rebier, as long as he's got his looper, his keys, MIDI controller, and a laptop, he could be in a hotel. He could
Yeah.
be nearly naked in a theater in Germany. Like whatever he wants to do, he's got the tools where all he needs to do is just plug them in, and then there's an audience.
Yeah.
So I liked that aspect of the pandemic where we were all kind of figuring out streaming or what things we liked doing remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Or didn't like. Some people were just like, I've never done Zoom. It's like, all right, that's why is that a brag for you?
Yeah.
But I'm definitely considering like things. Like one thing I did that I never thought I would do, because it's the combination of like being a people pleaser and trying to navigate that, but also being someone who wants to learn all aspects of the business, and for Earth Radio, we just delegated our bass player to do booking because he expressed interest. So I'm taking a step back from booking, but I'm focusing on the marketing and social media aspect of it to try and like blend. I would like to get to a point where I could do kind of like a Tim, not explicitly Tim and Eric, but like be
Yeah.
able to like tie creative things into the marketing aspect of it rather than
Yeah.
it feeling so formal and boring. It's like
Yeah.
as a band, you have an opportunity to do super funny marketing, like Thumpasaurus. This band Thumpasaurus just put out a new song called "I'm Pissed," and it's like a goofy rock song. They're kind of like Thumpasaurus just has that like funk. It's like LA jazzers making funk, but also like leaning into like a David Byrne or like a Talking Head or a
Totally. Yeah.
Devo.
Yeah.
And the way they advertise that song is they put up like a bunch of flyers and then memed the flyers, and it was like dad therapy. And it showed a picture of an angry dad and then a happy dad, and it's like, are you an angry dad? Do you want to be a happy dad? Like, follow this link, and then you click on the link and it just goes to the video.
The track. That's funny.
But yeah, I'm shifting in what things I like doing. Not that I'll totally be out of the booking loop
Yeah.
for a while, but it's I like the quote from Tony Hawk where he was talking about it was a couple years ago, and he was making a skateboard game app, and
Yeah.
some newscasters like, well, why are you doing that? Why are you making you're Tony Hawk, like, you're fine. And
Because he can, because he wants to.
yeah, he's basically just like, he's like, I kind of wanted to, and you kind of have to know every part of the business you're working in so that you know what you don't want to focus on. And yeah, I'm like, that's me. I just want to know what, I want to have said I've done every part of the business that I could, maybe not being like, like a I don't know, music publicist, like
Yeah.
not having an official title, but like trying things in that sphere.
Yeah.
Just to see what I can naturally do or what things I want to work on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I really liked that fader analogy. I think I'm going to carry that around with me because that's always something that I've struggled with, is like not picking something and sticking to it, but like choosing something in music to focus on, because there are so many things that interest me. Like I want to play, but I don't know if I just want to play, or or like as a performer, you kind of have to get over that like self-doubt of like, well, am I even good enough to like make a living off of just playing? And it's almost one of those things where like unless you do really really make it big, you kind of can't make a living off of just playing. A lot of people also teach. But teaching over the last 7 years, I know that I don't want to just teach. Like, and I didn't go to school to be a music educator because I don't want to do that. But I do like teaching one-on-one drum lessons, and I don't mind it, and I like teaching drumline, like front ensemble stuff, but I don't want to do that for a living. And I know I like audio, and I've been really diving into that and the production stuff. And that's also something where it's like, okay, I want to do a little bit of everything, but I don't know if I can do a little bit of everything. So I'm trying it out, and I'm trying to find a balance that works. So yeah, like turning up the faders on some things and turning down the faders on others. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it definitely helped me visualize like my career, because that's the thing that's been hard to explain to people who don't, they don't understand the nuance of being a modern creative person.
Yeah.
Like, there are those people who can find like something super niche and then they build like, it's like, oh yeah, we hire, it's Bill and the whoever's, and they're the best band in this tiny town in rural Michigan, and they'll get
Yep.
all the festival gigs that they have in the town. They'll play
Yep.
all the big events, and you can exist that way. You could be very hyper local and fill several needs. Like, you could just be that guy who's like, yeah, he's got recording gear and he teaches bass and viola. Like, I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
and but most people see the music industry as like, you're either busking and just with your hat out, and you take a video of you in this like vulnerable moment, and it's like, oh, it's a viral moment. Why is it this person should be famous? And then like
Yeah.
the other end, it's the people who are already famous and they don't care about the journey. They're glad to just be a fan of the famous person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's other people who get local music support, and I see them at almost every event and that they can be at, and they're very vocal about like support Michigan music and Michigan artists.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to have some, like, I think of all there's a generation of musicians who never had to worry about an online presence, but they don't know, and then they don't know how to teach the people like us who are like, we have to have some kind of presence or some understanding of social media to like help advertise what we do.
Yeah.
And then other businesses use those metrics when it's like totally not indicative of like the quality of an artist,
Mhm.
because some people can just literally pad their resume with like fake likes, and then what? You just have a guy who's not good showing up with no actual fans.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely like, and it like changes over the years too. Like, I know when I was going to school, I was a lot more into performance, and then I was a little bit more into teaching for a while, and like my friend Nick and I started teaching this winter drumline group at Fruitport. So Nick kind of built that from the ground up, and we started writing music for that. And so then I dove into composing a little bit more, and now I'm starting learning a lot about audio. So it kind of comes and it goes in phases, just where I'm at in my life and what I'm interested in. I think that also is just because we're young people and we're figuring out what we want to do. And I mean, we're totally capable of pursuing all these avenues. We're at a point in our lives where we can, and if we want to, there's no reason why we shouldn't. Which I think is super cool. Um, but it also kind of comes into the like play where we almost have to be like, if we're our own business and we're our own boss, we have to be like every single position. Like, we're our own marketing, we're our own sales team, we're our own CEO, we're our own accounting. Like, we have to do all of it, and sometimes we're not good at those aspects of it. And that's something that I definitely struggle with. I'm not super into like social media marketing world, and so I know that if I ever, have a project or something, I am not the person to put in charge of that, because that's not going to be my strong suit.
Yeah, and it's weird because like, I was talking with someone about the confusion of Facebook owning Instagram and Facebook, and having the worst marriage of platforms.
Yeah.
Like, it should just be so simple to like cross over all of the content, or there's still like, if you like type in to try and get that general help about social media, there's still people who are like, yeah, you still need to natively post to Instagram and Facebook. And I'm like, why? It's all set up for me to cross share and schedule. And it's like, organic posts do better for the algorithm. And like, then why does anyone schedule anything?
Yeah.
Like,
Then
why
why?
is that even an option? It's so, yeah, it's so like, it's like the people who can schedule, that are like, big corporate entities, and then can also put money against any post. They could boost every post they ever have with like a budget.
Yeah.
Like, that's, you know that's efficient, but it's also like not how an artist operates. And I agree that like we have to do so many things, and then that also fueled probably why I felt this past weekend that I was like, it's like, okay, July is going to be a busy month. I'm going to take a couple days off,
Yeah.
and in those 2 days, it's hard to relax when you're like, I could be doing other stuff, and then you're like, no, you're here to relax. This is self-care.
Mhm.
It's when you're ignoring work.
Yeah. Well, I
uh,
know like you've
yeah.
talked about setting a schedule for yourself, like having a set of working hours, and I think that's something that really helps like when you are just doing, you know, all of that kind of stuff on your own, setting specific times for work and specific times for not work is kind of the only way really to make that work.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to try that with me. It's hard. Like I think of, some inside baseball for Earth Radio. We we put out Reanimate last year,
Yeah.
and the single we released in July, earlier in the month, that was a mistake. we were we were trying, it was already plugged in, and then we had made a decision like, oh, maybe we'll push it back so that we spend, more of our shows in that month hyping up the fact it's coming out, and having more of an avenue to advertise it. We
Yeah.
just had wanted to put it out later. I found out the night before it dropped that it was going to come out, and I was like, I don't have anything I don't have any socials ready. I don't have anything scheduled. I don't have
Yeah.
any. So I like that night I had to, I took 3 hours and just like put together some assets, you
Blasted
know,
it.
yeah, like got things scheduled, got things changed late at night. And then when the single dropped, I was like, okay, there's the link. I can just, get stuff scheduled for like a few posts for the week. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, to have, I guess to have a schedule where, like, because there's always going to be variables, but yeah, having yourself set to a schedule, at least it can help with, not feeling totally out at the
Yeah.
whim of whoever or whatever
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. It's like a tedious work-life balance because obviously you love what you do. That's why most music people do music is because we love creating. But at the same time, it's not sustainable to create 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so, yeah, kind of setting that work-life balance for yourself, especially like I see like lots of memes on the internet about like America versus Europe where it's like America 1 week paid vacation, Europe 3 months off in the summer. Or it was like an email signature like I'll be back in 3 months. I'm spending the summer with my family. And then in America it was like I'm having a surgery, but you can text me on my cell phone. And it's like that's just kind of the way the culture is like if you really want something you have to work all the time, all day, every day, like grind, 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 and then you'll make it. But at some point that just becomes like super unhealthy, you know?
Yeah, I think of like Jack Conti. He talks a lot about, like there's a point where working hard on something has diminishing returns. Like he was talking about how he obsessed over a kick drum sound for like 4 days. And like all 4 of those days were just like A-Bing different mics, different sounds, different, processing, tracking multiple takes, mixing, sending different mixes. And ultimately it like didn't matter
Yeah.
because he then, I think it was around the time that when he was doing the Pomplamoose thing. I mean, I guess Pomplamoose is still a band, but
Yeah.
uh that was around the time they did their cover of Single Ladies, and that was thrown together on a much shorter timeline,
Yeah.
and it went super viral just because it happened to, you know like back then it was like if there was original content on YouTube that related to a more popular topic, that would get shown in the first page results
Yeah.
more frequently. And so yeah, tons of people found out about Scary Pockets through single ladies, and it was after the whole I'm gonna let you finish VMAs thing, so they just it was the lined up perfectly for them to go viral. But yeah, he talks about all the time, like, it's like you can work hard, but there's certain things that you just have to like put a bow on. So you have to set a deadline, otherwise you're just gonna hate everything you make and never put anything out. And
Yeah. And that's something like I've been trying to write a lot more, and part of it too is working on different audio stuff. So like working with different microphones, different setups, that sort of thing. And part of it is kind of working on like composing chops and collaborating with other people. And like the longer I sit and obsess over something like a kick drum sound or like a snare drum EQ or something, the worse it ends up being, because I just get into this like deep hole of like trying to fix it and trying to change it until it doesn't matter anymore. And so I like, part of it I have to remind myself that like sometimes the best sounds or the best ideas are the ones that come naturally. And yeah, and trying to collaborate that way instead of just sitting all night every night for a week trying to get the snare drum EQ. It's not going to end up how you want it to end up.
No. Was there anything recently that you like, I don't know, started working on or even finished that you were just like, why did this take me so?
Yeah, I had a project for my last studio techniques class I was in, and it you had to be a recording, like there were specific requirements, but it could be either an original or a cover. And I decided I wanted it to be an original, and I had this guitar line that I had just kind of thrown around for a while. And I ended up spending like pretty much every night that semester putting the song together, just a couple hours every night. But like I just kind of threw myself at it. I was like, I really want this to be good. Like we're going to play these for the class. Like it's got to be perfect. And I spent so much time on it. And not that the final like end result isn't good, but like looking back on it now when I listen to it, I just think like at the time I probably thought that this sounded really cool. Now that I'm listening to it, it just sounds okay, and I spent all that time on it. And part of it too is just the lack of like, I mean, it's a class, so it's a learning experience, and so I'm learning like things about gain staging, and like I probably should have recorded the live drums way earlier than I recorded the live drums. I recorded live drums last, which doesn't make any sense really. I did all the other instruments first. So it's just stuff like that where like going through it was just a huge like learning experience. And I now when I listen back to it, it's just kind of reflective of like my knowledge of what I was doing at the time, which is cool.
Yeah, it gives you that perspective, and you can I find that like when that happens, it's like, oh, now I have a bunch of shortcuts for next time when I try to think about what to do with something.
Totally.
And yeah, it's so easy to just like obsess over, like I think of there's a video project that I'm doing where I have to record a couple solo piano pieces and then do it to video.
Yeah.
And I know like it's due at the end of August. So I know the tracking part won't be as hard. The video part will take more time. So I'm like, I'm planning on like, trying to learn and knock out the song before the end of the songs before the end of this month. And then, spend time tweaking the video. And I'm hoping it won't take me super long because it's just me and a couple camera angles, but
Yeah.
I also have to play around with shots, and it gives me at least more things to plan out, and then it motivates me to wake up earlier too, which I didn't do today. But
Yeah.
I'm trying. That's a small overarching goal I have, is to continue to have my mornings because I had them in the quarantine times, and now that it's gig season again, I'm, Sundays I'm like, oh, it's 11. Wait, what happened?
Well, and that's one of those things too where it's just like the music world runs on a different clock than the rest of the world because gigs happen late at night and go until late. And then the rest of the world, all the jobs start early at the morning or 7 or 8 a.m. or whatever. So it's hard to balance that. And especially in the recording world too. Like if you had a studio and somebody wanted to come in and record a track, it could be midnight and they want to record something then because that's when an idea struck them or whatever. Like you just
Right.
have to be open to booking sessions at midnight and just being up really late, which I already know it's gonna be a struggle for me because I'm such a morning person. I love like having my evening off. It's like my me time and going to bed early, which I know makes me sound like such a grandma. But I like going to bed early and then getting up early because I feel like I can be so much more productive when I do that.
Yeah, I definitely notice when and maybe it's probably because of the past couple of days I've taken super chill. I'll naturally stay up later because I haven't been running around as much. Um, yeah, and I'll feel it the next morning of just like, oh, I'm just tired. I'm not like, it's not like I don't drink a lot anymore, so it's not like I get hungover like, you know crazy. It's like, oh, I had a crazy night. It's just more
Yeah,
like I was up late and this is my life now.
but I do. I'm now nocturnal.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind being not nocturnal if I could, like, I don't know, if I could just I could get some things done at night, but other night is for me, night times are like I either do the a ton of very basic mind level things, or I'm having to, like, have a couple hours where I'm just really creatively productive. But I also haven't played around a ton with, like, when am I most creative, or when does it make sense for me to work, because I've been, yeah, like I mentioned, such a passenger to my schedule.
Yeah.
um so yeah, that'll be fun to figure out.
I almost want to I feel like there's got to be an app out there. There's like an app for everything. I feel like there has to be like an app out there that's like find out when you're like your most productive times of the day and you just like kind of like log what you're doing or like when you feel tired or like when you feel energized. There's got to be something out there for that where you can like figure out when your most creative like spots are and then schedule that time in for yourself to be like, okay, I'm gonna work on a song at this time.
Right, yeah, at least, I would think like journaling probably would help, just like being aware of, well, and that's kind of what's been happening with the self-care, trying to focus on that. Because it's never ever in all the years I've known myself been a priority. But I thought about, it wasn't, oh, 25 quarter life crisis. It was more like, I'm going to be 30 in a couple of years. I should probably, like, build some good habits for my 30s. And yeah, and to, like, have, like, even before this, I went on a walk and it was like 45 minutes or something, and even just that, it was like, okay, a little energy bump. It was hot, so the sweat and just the moving and breathing
Hmm.
is like, okay, I'm engaging the human part of me now.
I'm
And
alive.
yeah, I'm alive, and I can, well, and I've noticed too, like, really having to be critical, because last year it was just like out the window. Like, I was in my head earlier in the year, I was like, this is the year. And then as soon as, like, quarantine hit, is like, I'll take the pizza and the
Yep.
sides, please.
And the ice cream later. Yes, thank you.
And yeah, and if you could just put the ice cream in the freezer for later, that'd be great.
Yep.
Um, and but now it's like, with every step, because really I've only been in this mindset more since April, of just like, what if I took money I would normally spend on food I don't need, to get, do these float sessions, the sensory deprivation stuff.
Whoa,
I
I've never done that.
Yeah, it's funny because it's got such an intimidating name, so, like,
Yeah.
clinical name. But it's literally, you could just boil it down to, like, you're kind of just sitting in this salinated water, so you're buoyant, and then your body without any light, and your head, like, I always put in earplugs because my ears go underwater even with the float.
Yeah.
And it's like, without any distractions, your body just kind of like melts into the sensation of like, oh, it's no longer just my body, it's this whole tank, and in some, like, this weird sensation of relaxation. And your body just kind of naturally starts adjusting to being in the water. Your muscles relax a little more, and you can focus on breathing, and I haven't fallen asleep, but I've gotten, like, deeper, I don't know, meditative states, I guess. And
Can you hear your blood moving in your body?
I can hear my thoughts before they're formed.
Sounds scary.
It's surprisingly, it's not scary for me, at least, because it's almost like a paid excuse to, like, shut out the world for an hour. Which is a little reductive because it's more than, like, me just sitting in my bed. But it is, like, the routine's pretty simple too. It's like the place I go to in Easttown, Float, spelled PHLOT.
Unwealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've driven past that and I was like, oh, that's one of those the places with the tanks filled with salt
Tanks.
water.
With the tanks. Yeah, it was funny. I explained it to my parents too, because they're like, oh, you're doing your first one? I'm like, no, this is like my 12th. And they're like,
Yeah.
what? It's like, you have
do this now.
Yeah, it's like, what is it? Tell me what it is. Because yeah, it's literally just like, you walk in, you take a shower, you get in the tank there, and then the outside lights are already kind of dim and they slowly fade away, and then you're kind of left to just, like, drift in and out of your busy mind, find moments of calm. Unless you're claustrophobic, then it probably would be horrible because you're just in a tank.
Yeah.
It's big enough where I could, like, almost stand in it, and then the water is, like, just deep enough where you're not hitting the bottom, but you're still floating, and it doesn't feel like unless you literally, like, turn and face into the water, like, there's no way to like,
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable or unsafe.
Yeah.
And then then of course you're all salty, so you take another shower when you're done, and it's like, oh, I just get just
Double
hot,
shower.
yeah, like, hot relaxing shower, hot warm relaxing, hour of meditative floating, and then another like relaxing shower.
Yeah. That's something that I have to, like, take a little bit more advantage of is meditation, which, like, I know people talk about it a lot and I've done it before, but, like, I've noticed when I'm actively, like, making time to do it and doing it, like, on a daily basis, it really does help, just because the world is so busy, and, like, setting aside the time to just, like, not think and just let your brain process everything that happens during the day is, like, it's so crucial, and you don't realize it when you're not doing it.
Yeah, there's definitely times where, like, I've been getting it back into my practice a little bit more outside of, I mean, it's not every day, but, like, if I come home from a particularly engaged day of, like, like, I'm working on 3 things and then someone shoots me a text and I have to work on a 4th thing. It's like coming home and just taking that even, like, 10 minutes to just, like, breathe and get recentered. And um yeah, because there was a point when I was in my master's, I took, what was it, so I think it was Celexa. It was like a low dose and like anxiety medication or something.
Yeah.
because that was like just peak insanity
Correct.
of like, it wasn't even like, oh, it's almost time for my recital. It was literally like the first year. And it was a mix of like, all right, I'm not teaching. Am I doing enough? Like I was strapped working at Grand Valley, and I'm not doing, it's like going from 15 credits a semester to, 15 to 18 a
Yeah.
semester, and then going to like 15 a year.
Yeah.
And so there was a level of like imposter syndrome of like, do I deserve this money? Am I doing enough to warrant this? And yeah, that was just like, but then as soon as I started like, finding more moments to just breathe in general,
Mhm.
granted it was like probably post graduate school, but it's like now I can breathe. It's
Totally.
been a better experience. And also surprisingly, being in a sound environment, like I don't mind, like at the end of the day, I like doing sound. It's just, it's like getting through the sea of micro moments of like, no, stop. Don't do that.
Yeah.
It's too loud.
Yeah.
um but yeah, it's nice to have at least some reminder that like things that are inherent to, like things you don't need equipment for, like breathing, like
Yeah.
unless you do need equipment for
Unless you
breathing.
do.
uh Not to exclude anyone who is currently needing that technology, but just
Sorry.
breathing in general, for meditative purposes, it's like, oh yeah, I could just take 10 minutes. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time, but 10 minutes of just focusing on breathing feels like an hour. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, perspective and all that,
And all that jazz.
all the great jazz. Are you still with In the Blue at all, or they have, I don't, or were you not with In the Blue? Were you with some of
I
those
was playing
dudes?
with Steve a lot. I was
Okay.
playing with Steve Rothstein a lot, and we had a group called Green on Blue, which is funny. There's a lot of names with blue in the jazz scene.
Yeah.
It's kind of overdone a little bit. But we haven't done that since like a couple years after college, so maybe 2017 might have been the last time we picked that up. It's been a minute since I've really been involved like in jazz, like in specifically a jazz group, not for any particular reason. I think it's just one of those things where like I have my jazz fader turned down for a little while, and I've got the teaching and the audio production faders turned up right now. But jazz is something that I'll always love, and I'll always come back to playing jazz because that's where I started with drums. I started off in 8th grade playing for jazz band, specifically drums for jazz band, because I thought it was so cool and I really wanted to do it, and I'll always do it.
Right.
But at the moment, I've got that fader all the way down, which isn't a bad thing. I'll come back and I'll pick it up. It's funny to think back on that though, because there was a time when I was finishing up my degree at GV and I was thinking about going to grad school. I never ended up going to grad school, but I was like actively looking at applying to places specifically for jazz like performance for a master's. Um,
Wow.
yeah, because I was really into jazz while I was at GV, like playing in the combos and the jazz orchestra and all that stuff. And I looked into doing a master's of jazz performance and had like a summer off after I finished college, and then I was like, I don't really know if I want to do this. I think I want to take a year off and think about it. And then it was one of those things where it never happened.
Right. I definitely remember taking a year off. I mean, I worked at Allendale High School, and I had turned down going to Boston
Yeah.
And that was a year of like, did I make the right decision? Like financially, yes, because everyone in my family probably would have been ruined by me going to New England Conservatory.
Yeah.
But I also think it's weird, those moments too, where like I think about the, you know, if there is a multiverse, as it's fun to delight in sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like there's a Dutcher that went to NEC and
Yeah.
like built more connections on the East Coast, maybe moved to New York, you know, got into the scenes there.
Yeah.
Maybe in a few years, you know, become bi-coastal and just start, you know, have a place in LA and that I can crash and then live in New York.
Mhm.
Um, and my roommate would have been this dude, Steve Bilodeau, who I think at the time I think he was at Berkeley. It was him and his girlfriend at the time, but now he lives in Canada and he works with like one of Canada's like top producers as like an engineer.
Heck yeah.
And I was, you know, it's weird like seeing it because I'm sure at the time he was probably like, this dude just bailed, because I literally bailed like August.
Sorry.
I was like, hey, just kidding. I'm not going to be your third roommate when your lease is up next month. And I'm not going to go to your school that starts in a month and you now have to use those funds for someone else.
Sorry.
Sorry, my life. Sorry. But that led to basically getting the same amount of money for Western, but that instead of that amount of money covering only like, yeah, I could have used the money for NEC to cover certain classes, but not a full year of school. It didn't cover room and board if I wanted to live on campus, and it was more expensive to live off campus.
Yeah.
So that wasn't, you know, uh, like to see that money, then it was like, oh, I could use this money and literally like I would have a place I could rent for much cheaper.
Mhm.
It would cover all my, you know, almost my entire 2 years at Western.
Yeah.
Um, which yeah, definitely made a lot more sense financially.
Yeah.
Um, and Western's got a good program, got a lot of good faculty, and you know, people like Eddie Codrington who keep winning awards.
Yeah. I was considering going to Western for a master's when I was looking at places to go. That was like top 3, and part of it too is that for us it's right there. I mean, we're in Grand
Right.
Rapids, it's in Kalamazoo. It's so close for us to have a good program like that. Um, but yeah, it didn't end up happening. I'm not mad about it at all. I mean, I'm in substantially less debt than I would have been if I had done something like that. But then also I just think too that like with that, I feel like kind of diving into school and using that almost as like not like a crutch, but like for a while I was like, school is what I'm doing and this is all I have time for, and I'm not going to think about my personal life. I'm going to avoid all of these other things because I'm so busy with school.
Yep.
And after I took that summer off, I was like, no, maybe I need to take a second and actually think about what I'm doing with my life and what I like to do outside of school and what my other interests are. So I kind of
Right.
had to like take a step back and not let myself use school as a crutch.
Yeah, because school's really good. I think of someone like Jordan Van Hemert, like he's, you know, he's got his doctorate.
Yeah.
He's just slaying it at the academic level as an instructor, and you know, he's got endorsements through his career. Like, you know,
Mhm.
he's the type of person who I can only imagine he likes, you know, he likes teaching people, but he also likes academia in the sense of what it can provide.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, it's like someone was asking me like, would you go for your doctorate? I'm like, I would go for my doctorate if I knew I was going to be moving or if I was going to start a family. Like if I had met someone and like, oh, now I'm starting a family, it's like, all right, now I'll do the doctorate, because then it'll get me back into academia wherever I would do it. And then I would have that extra layer of credentials to apply for other jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems like a lot of schools are shifting towards like having some sort of accreditation versus like, you know, living the thing you're teaching,
Mm-hmm.
which has its pros and cons. Like if someone's literally lived the thing it's like, hey, all the people you're learning about, I've met them, I've
Yeah.
toured with them. Like this, I am the history book. And some schools are like, but yeah, could you also teach out of the history book? And they want someone who just like follows curriculum so it's easier to track progress, but
Yeah.
or whatever reason. But yeah, doctorate, that's the only that's the only time I would consider doing it, because yeah, there's so many things I can do that I don't need even a bachelor's for that I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing right now. But it's nice having the master's is like, really, it's just like, without saying it explicitly, it's an extra flex so that people
Yeah.
know I know what I'm talking about when people interact with me. And it gives me the thing that I found really great, especially because of the pandemic and saying no a lot. I could just say no without feeling bad. If someone like some stranger just hits me up and they're like, I would love to see if I could use you potentially for my project. It's like, all right, I have plenty of things to reference. Look me up, listen to what I've done. That's the audition.
Yep.
Like it's my tiny version of like when Glasper was throwing shade at was it Lauryn Hill, I think?
I think
And
so.
and Lauryn Hill wanted him to audition. He's like, I have a Grammy-winning Blue Note album. That's my audition.
That's my audition. Here are my tapes.
Yeah, here's my award-winning music. Like, and for me, it's like, here's a master's degree and the stuff I've done previous.
When I think of like learned experience, the person that always comes to mind is Tim Franchek, because he literally lived the experience. He's played with so many people and lived through so much of that. And I actually literally took jazz history from him at Grand Valley, and I don't know if he like had any like formal training on like teaching a history class, but like that dude literally lived through it. Like nobody is more qualified to teach jazz history. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's been my gripe with music academia in general. It's like you could meet a lot of people. You can be, if you're a rhythm instrument, there's a lot of opportunities for you, like random gigs on campus, random, oh, we need a pianist for a contemporary chamber ensemble, like at
Yeah.
Grand Valley, or like you could be an accompanist, you can play at the on-site chapel, you could, there's a million different things that, a flute player could do all those things, but it's harder when there's like 50 million flute players and like 10 pianists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely like the lived experience. I try to listen to. I think of studying with Dr. Lupus, and he would tell me about all of his like insane undergrad juries that are like, it's like, learn both Well-Tempered Clavier books. It's like 50 songs, and then we'll just draw keys and book numbers, and that's your jury. So he'd just sit there and be like, all right, play out of book one, the one in A flat, and then he'd just start playing it, and be
Wow.
like, all right, play book 2 number 5, and then he's like, okay, that's the one in G, or whatever, however that cycle
From
works.
memory? From
Yeah,
memory? Oh my
had to
God.
do it from memory in a semester at this Italian conservatory.
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
that's insane. It's like, you can teach me because you've been through the
You've
gauntlet.
been through literal hell. You can teach me how to do this.
It's like you're the guy who can, like, be called to sub on a concerto in 4 days and pull it off.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Or like, Jeremy Siskin, this dude who could was very, very competent, more than competent, like a very proficient classical and jazz player, but also, has a career in the education sphere as well. And, has his own published method books and, just see, or even like Matthew Fries, who I studied with my second year at Western. I think he said he didn't start piano until college, and
Wow.
just hustled like crazy and became this proficient player who'd lived in New York for a lot of years. And yeah, it's like that shows more than, because sometimes you get the educators who haven't done anything outside of academia, and you're like, how much real life you messing up on an academia gig is less jarring than you messing up on, like, you're a young player who's hustling and trying to be on the come up and goes out to a jam, doesn't know part of the changes. Yeah, doesn't know part of the changes to a head that you called, and then you mess up and they're like, well, I guess you'll get it next time. And then you go home and you hate yourself, and then you pick yourself back up and go do it again. And yeah, it's like academia gives you a little bit more of a security blanket that's like, well, at least my students like me.
And I have my degrees and I'm good.
Yeah, which sure, like there's it's like the people who they tend to only have an audience on streams, and they built a streaming audience and they don't have to leave. They literally have they could, the advancing for all their gigs is like, what do I want to drink? What do I want to have, the red lighting or the blue? Like, they could just pick whatever they want and feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. There's so many paths to music that you can kind of pick and choose. Like, you could be that dude who's like gets a profile when they're like 75. It's like, this man has worked on this brand of guitars as a repair tech, and he's serviced people like The Edge, and like, you could be that guy. Or you could be like, oh yeah, Mr. Thompson, he was my favorite band director, and that inspired me to go on to school. Like, there's so many like rungs on the ladder you could be involved in.
Totally.
But yeah, although there are so many rungs, it's not like we're all built for all of them, though.
True. Yeah. I don't want to be like a jack of all trades, master of none. Although, sometimes with music and being our own bosses, we kind of have to be a little bit. We have to be able to do a little bit of all of it ourselves, but I don't know if anyone's really expecting us to really master all of it, unless they are.
I feel like that's the one thing I'm trying to get into with the promotional aspect, is like figuring out what venues like, because not every venue gives good reciprocation in terms of like marketing a show that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because they're just kind of like, it's like, oh, this show isn't going to sell that well, and blah blah blah. It's like, okay, I get it. You don't want to spend hours in manpower for like a local show that might only draw 150 people.
Yeah.
Like, but what if you helped promote it? It could be bigger. But
good.
Yeah, and just having all those things queued up, like, some people want photos, some people want a B-roll trailer, some people want, shots of you doing something in the studio, shots of you doing something live. Like,
yeah,
that's like it's like when I try to stress on the band, like, we need content, like, they're thinking like fully produced crazy things, and I'm like, no, the Charlie D'Amelio just dances in a mansion. That's her whole life. And she's got a brilliant followers, and that's it. Like, what else does she do? I don't know. She's probably, yeah. It's like, I can't do that, because I mean, I could, but I don't know. It would not go as far as her.
Yeah.
So like that's what I mean. It's like content can literally just be anything. Like there's no defined like success in a creative field is so nebulous that there's no defined like some people do it because they want to get recognized by the people they look up to. Other people do it because they want to be famous. Other people do it because they can't go to sleep unless they make something,
Yeah.
or like it's all over the place for what you could do. So there shouldn't be like, I don't know, there shouldn't be the, I don't know, people telling you can't try something when, I think of like Ben Levin from the band Bent Knee.
Mm-hmm.
He got really into animation over the last year and a half, and now does a bunch of contracted work doing animation for like, he's done stuff with Tim and Eric's podcast, the Office Hours.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's just Tim Heidecker with his team, but and like he's done these random, I share them a lot on Instagram, just the little animated they just look like weird little animated 3D duck animal looking things. And
Oh
then
yeah, I've seen those.
yeah, and like all of the vocals are like, I think Vocaloid, which is like almost a vocoder sound, but a little bit more, I don't know. It sounds like it's like you're getting a little bit of the voice and then basic synth, but it's not strictly a vocoder. It's like some variant. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
sounds weird and funny, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's who knows? Maybe in 10 years, like, oh,
You'll be doing that.
yeah, I've picked up woodworking and now but I don't know. It's all over the place, as I'm sure, you know, getting back into Okaycool, everyone's got ideas of what they want to do, and it's like,
We're all over the place, man. It's just like everyone's lived their lives over the last year and just gotten into their own thing and their own routines and like evolved in their own ways. And sometimes it's hard to pick back up a project like that when you almost become different people over like a long period like that. And that's why I said like why we're just kind of starting out slow and like just hanging out and playing with each other and not really booking gigs is because we kind of all have to decide if this is something that still fits in our lives, like if it's something we still want to do moving forward, if it makes sense for all of us, if we're still passionate about it, because I think if you're not, then there's not really a reason to do it just because that's what you were doing before. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think of, our drummer Madison. He's moving to Nashville at the end of August, I think, or sometime in
Not,
August.
not officially moved there yet. He's on his way.
Yeah, he was going to be there with like all the war and treaty stuff, and then that kind of went up in the air with COVID, and
Yeah.
then he still, he visited the city a couple times. He's still got friends. There's another drummer. I don't know if you met Ryan Deminick at all.
Uh, Possibly.
He's played some Blushing Monk gigs. Funny enough, he hasn't been recorded with the band yet, but he's gonna be moving with Madison and maybe one other person to Nashville. And in this process of figuring it out, for him figuring out what's going to happen with his life and then how that's going to affect Earth Radio,
Mm-hmm.
it is like, it's part of what we had discussed at the top of the year as a band. Like, we need to assess, like, okay, who's in the band, what roles are there, how are we doing this? Because it's
Yeah.
no longer, it's no longer 4 people living in Grand Rapids. It's up to, 6 people living all over,
U.S.
South Bend and Ypsi and then Nashville. And
Yeah.
so there's a way, like, I think of bands like Periphery, they made it work
Mm-hmm.
with having like their first album. I think the singer lived in California. Everyone else lived on the East Coast. So he was like, everything was remote except for, I think he flew in for one session, but
Mm-hmm.
um there is a way to do things remote and make it work, but it's also figuring out like we getting the habits and the systems in place to make that type of business idea work, where we can still be creative and still play and still do things as a band, and having another drummer in the band helps. But yeah, it's like everyone's lived very different lives in the last year, even with the band still doing stuff. And I know there's like, I see it with, Madison moving to Nashville. Part of it is like, he wants to get that shot, and
Sure.
he's got an in to an up and coming band.
Yeah.
Like way more than up and coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I saw that they were signed to William Morris Entertainment, I'm like, well, your future is just totally fine.
Yep. See you later.
It's like, I tell half the people that, they're like, it's like, how do we support, not someone asking this directly, but the tone of the conversation is like, how do I support artists? It's like, tell all of your connected rich friends that you keep bragging to your normal friends about. Like, I know this producer who worked on the Emmys. It's like, cool. What's his name?
What's his name?
Does he need a keyboard play? Like, half the time it's just people like don't realize they can elevate a band by just telling someone about the band. They, instead of just, it's like, it's cool being a fan, and always appreciative of people who, in the moment I can see them at a show or all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's, word of mouth like is still a great, driver of success. Just letting people know that this band exists. They're looking for these things. It's like, does anyone want to be a manager or a booking assistant or a promotions assistant or
yeah. Especially in the music world, I feel like that's something that's always going to exist, even with like the advent of technology. For music, like word of mouth is kind of going to be one of those things, one of those like mainstay ways kind of for like us to network. Because like, yeah, you can hear somebody's music online, like you can stream it, you can watch a video, but like at the end of the day, nothing supports them more than like going to the show, like showing up, buying the merch, telling somebody about the band, and like actually spreading it via word of mouth. I feel like is the way that like those things happen still.
Yeah, because I and it's come to fruition in some aspects. I know, and this is not trying to throw shade. I know the shade. Yeah, this is just a gossip podcast. I think of like the amount of people that I saw who were like, I miss live. Where is it? It's gone, and I can't. And like the amount of people who I've actually seen at any show that I like, not even ones that I've done, just any show. It's like you miss live music, but what is your like? Are you missing, taking Molly at Electric Forest for 4 days, or are you missing like going with your friend to a local brewery and catching someone playing an intimate concert? Like,
yeah,
what is your like you missing? Like, because I remember running, there was someone at the Bob, not a good indicator of culture, but the Bob, there's just some bro in a polo outside of the Bob, trying to talk about himself. And and I happened to overhear that he was like, man, there's like no good live music in this city. Like, where's all the good live music? And I'm like, just because you can't see Kid Rock every weekend or whatever you like.
Like, probably Kid Rock.
Yeah, he's we were just smoking different things. It's like, that's the anthem of white boy summer if Chet Hanks has his way.
Oh yeah.
He's just, although I find it funny, random side tangent, because I brought up Chet Hanks. I find it funny that Chet Hanks advocates for the white boy summer, but he's actively like being in the Jamaican culture,
Yeah.
like trying to do that.
I don't get it.
It's like, do you like Rastas because of the color scheme and listening to reggae music at a festival
Yeah.
and feeling like you're a working man when you're the son of like one of the greatest actors ever?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. I don't have enough time to. That's what another thing I've realized. I'm way more comfortable just being like, I'll never see these people again. I don't need to put that much emotional energy into them.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
like at a gig or a wedding event.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to say I'm less cynical after the pandemic, but I'm still very pragmatic with how, just thinking about gigs and like okay, last story that popped up. I mean, this is a conversation, so I don't want to keep being like, oh, another thing.
Go for it.
But this past weekend I had a wedding, and it was at the Felt Estate Manor.
Sure.
Out in Saugatuck. It's just like someone used to own a mansion and now it belongs to the city, and it's a nice spot to throw weddings.
Yeah.
And they had a tent area next to the building, and it was like concrete floor, and then the tent could be sealed except for, all the way around, and the entrances if you wanted to, but they left obviously the front and back open.
Yeah.
But the weather radar said it's going to rain, definitely. It's going to storm, definitely. There's a definite tornado watch. And it's, all the recipes for like, hey, maybe we should move this inside, and you should tell people to move it inside earlier, and you should have a backup plan.
Yes.
But they didn't. And
they didn't.
we were halfway through our first set. It started raining. It rained really hard. It flooded all the concrete. So we had to, stop, power everything down, quickly pick up cables off the ground. Like things were just actively getting soaked.
Yeah.
And, some lady comes over and is like, well, if we could move you to the higher spot, we'll move you to the higher area. And I'm like, the whole floor.
It's all underwater.
It's all underwater. What are you? And then they're like, get those cables off the ground. Hurry. And I'm like, the cables are fine. That's easy to replace. He was moving his $1,200 bass amp.
Yep.
It's like, if that's how you want to be helpful, like get out of the way, because we need to move a lot of equipment. But it was that reminder of like, it's like, oh yeah, if I could build something online, I won't have to do as many of those gigs that are like just people not knowing what to do in the event of a problem.
Yeah.
But
just all out anarchy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. I'd like to think there was some level of like they probably handled themselves better in other crises, but it was just literally like as things are flooding, they're like, there's a dry spot in the. I'm like, no, there's not. And then the power went out, so I'm like, why? This is over.
We're done here.
Yeah, I'm like, what more reasons do you need? Like there is an active monsoon. There's no power.
They also definitely should have seen it coming, because like I remember looking at the radar on that day. It was Saturday, right?
Yeah.
I remember looking at the radar on Saturday and being like, oh, it's definitely going to storm, and there's definitely a tornado watch, so I'm not going outside today.
Right. And meanwhile, like everyone in the band is driving like, 45 minutes to an hour to get, or even 2 hours. One person was driving from like Detroit area, 2+ hours. And he had to get there early because he was the host MC / PA person. So he had to get there at like noon at least. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, people they're like, maybe there's a chance. And it's like, no.
No, sorry.
You should be used to disappointment by now with the pandemic.
But also in just like planning ahead, and hey, if it's gonna rain, maybe we plan this indoors, even though you really want to have outdoors. That might not be practical.
Right. Because then it turned into the discussion of like, they were like, well, you could move inside. And I'm like, all right, the Felt Manor has a ballroom. That's where events can be held indoors. The ballroom is on the 3rd floor. There's no elevator, and it is not a direct staircase to the ballroom. It's like you have to go up one flight of stairs, and then you're at the 2nd floor, or like the 1st floor, and then you navigate to another area of the building to get the next floor. And it's like by the time we moved everything, set it up, checked, it would have been, we would have had a hat. Yeah, like we would have been done. Like it would have been like, well, time to go.
Then that's the end of the wedding.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's like you can only do so much when everything is telling you no.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Which is, I guess, a good sentiment for life. There's only so much you can do when everything's telling you no.
Time to choose a different path.
Yeah, time to adjust, or choose a different path, adjust the path.
Mm-hmm.
You can't stop. Just stop it. But yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, it's been a while since. I think the last time I saw you was the listening room, probably when you had your residency there with Normal Mode.
Oh right, yeah.
Last time I think we got to catch up, which even that was a few months ago, I think.
Yeah, like March or something.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah, because that just ended June 12th, the residency days, which was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, yep. Now things are open up again, and at some point, I want to have a physical studio that I can invite people out to and make it more of a fun. I mean, not that this isn't fun, but make it even more fun to have, like in person and have like, we have the fridge in our part of the building, so I could just stock it full of. It's like, you want a sparkling water? I have a soda stream.
Like, look at me, I'm a professional.
Yeah, I have a studio. That I rent an office out. But yeah, where can people? Do you want people to find you? Instagram, website, any of those things, or Okaycool, or?
Me personally, just I really just exist on Instagram and Facebook, and both of them are just my name, Makenzie Mattis. I think on Instagram it's Makenzie.Mattis. And then for Okaycool, we are also Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, I believe, and that would be Okaycool Band, because we gotta make it so people know that that's the band.
Yeah, gotta let people know. And then to anyone watching now or in the future, when this comes out, you can check out all that I'm up to, DrSnedeker.com, or you can support directly going to any of the social medias, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Follow the podcast on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, all those good things. Or you can just cut straight to the financial support and go to patreon.com/DrSnedeker. And, you can become a member for as low as $5, but you could also be a member for $1 million. So don't forget that.
Never forget that.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for making time and the reschedule.
Yeah, you're good. No, thank you for having me and let me just chat about life post pandemic. I feel like it's just this nebulous time where that's really all anyone has. That's all we have to talk about right now. We just got to get it all out and then we can move on.
Yeah, it's been like almost like a therapy session with a lot of the people I've talked to. That they're like, wow, I haven't done that in a year, or like, oh wow, my first gig, since last January of 2020 or whatever.
Yeah. Here's my life revelation since the last time I went out.
Yeah, here's everything I've done, and here's all the introspective thoughts I've had. Because everyone processes it differently.
Yeah,
I thought it was funny. The mechanic I bring my car to, one of the things that was like a major changing point, it seemed like, for him in his routine was instead of going out to a restaurant, he seemed like a Bob Evans kind of dude,
Yeah.
or like a Denny's. Instead of going out to a restaurant for breakfast, he would get this, the sausage McMuffin combo at McDonald's. He's like, I get a lot of the same flavors I like, just, for like $5. And I'm like, to say that's been, it's like my breakfast habit changed. That's been the biggest thing. Like, cool.
Hey, you know what? That works for him. Everybody has their thing.
Yeah. It's like some people, it was like, questioning their entire life up to that point, and other people, it was like, I like breakfast sandwiches now.
Yep, I just eat a different breakfast. That's it.